Hey, what's going on everyone? Today we're going to go over the meta snapshot for patch 14.21. This is going to be the week 2 update, and most importantly, a lot of big tournaments are actually going to be played on this patch, so we'll get to see how things work on ladder versus in tournaments, which could be pretty cool if you are following along with that. But let's just hop right in. We got a bit of an interesting S tier this week. I think Ahri Bastion Reroll is going to be the best comp of the week, but you do need a pretty decent spot for it. I mean, that goes for every comp. But specifically this one, other than that, I think there are a lot of good Ryze comps out there that people should probably be playing. There's like Portal Ryze, Ryze Flex. Some people even play Ryze in the Witchcraft comp. If you look at Witchcraft emblem, for example, Ryze performs better than Karma, which is what people normally do. And you pretty much just run it in place of that and run Zoe so that you get Scholar. After that, we have Jinx Wukong, probably one of the bigger hit or miss comps in my opinion. It either does really well or not so well, but we'll talk more about that later. Of course, we're going to be going over every single one of these comps after the summary. Mage Reroll, still a very strong go-to in the past couple of weeks. High horsepower Lillia, one of the best hero augments right now, along with Zap Attack Blitz. It works really well because you can play the Ahri Bastion Reroll with it, and it's pretty much just the same comp, you just pretty much use a hero augment with it. Zap Attack Blitz works really well with Ziggs Reroll. Reroll Veigar, it's the same thing as Mage Reroll, but you go for Veigar instead. Faerie Kalista, very consistent. So if you ever don't know what to do, Faerie Kalista is going to be the comp for you. Eldritch, good with certain augments. Multistriker Reroll. This is probably my favorite comp for people who are like newer to the game. Kogmaw Reroll, play this when you have 2 tanky. Ziggs Reroll, solid. Shapeshifter Flex, a little bit worse than before, but still very good. And then after that, we have Flex, Karma, Gwen, Fiora, Witchcraft, Fiora, Karma. Or I guess you could add Ryze into this as well. You know what? I'm just going to change the name of it right now to Witchcraft. And then after that, we have Deja Vu Galio, Warwick Reroll, Spin to Win Wukong. Pretty much the same thing as the Jinx Wukong. Sugarcraft, Arcana Varus, Blaster Vanguard Chrono Karma, Witchy Wallop Poppy, and Pyro Varus at the very end. For the B tier, I wouldn't really touch these comps too much, but we have Frost Pyro Olaf, Warrior Katarina, Akali Nyla, Fast Nining, Pillar Flame Shen, Built Different, Syndra Cassiopeia, Sweet Tooth Nunu, Molten Caramel Rumble, and lastly, like 2 tanky Blaster. I'm really surprised this comp was never a thing the entire set. And then we have Spider Queen Elise. It really doesn't make sense to me that 2 tanky Blaster wasn't ever a thing though, because you legit play Ezreal, Swain, Nico, and Hui, and they're all 3-cost units, so it should make sense, right? But it just never came to be, apart from when we were playing it on the public beta environment before the set even came out. But onto the comps, we have Ahri Reroll first. You want to be focusing your items onto your Ahri. Leftover items can go on Zoe. And then whoever you 3-star first, Lillia or Poppy, make that your main tank. For items on Ahri, you want to just have a blue buff and then a bunch of AP items. Any of them will do. You don't have to be too keen on getting specific ones. And then have some sort of magic penetration on your team, either with the Ionic Spark or a Static Shiv in the backline. There's also the Scholar Vanguard build, which you can see down here, where you tank up either Rumble or Galio. Sometimes even Mordekaiser if you're able to afford it, but pretty much you just want to get a lot of 3-star units and then put the Arcana bonus on your Ahri. That way you get a ton of AP for her, actually for your entire team, and she's able to do a lot of carrying after that. Signs to go for this comp is just like a heavy reroll augment or like tons of Ahris, or perfect items if no one's going for it. By the way, if you want to read the full write-up, head on over to the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta, and if you want to do some data checking, or build comps on your own, go to teamfight.lol. You could go to the team builder top right, or check out champions. Like you could type in like 2-cost units, and then you could look up Ahri and stuff like that. Like 3.89 as a 3-star, pretty good stuff. Especially when the play rate is like decently high compared to the other 2-cost units. Next comp up we have is Portal Ryze. Portal Ryze has just always been really good this entire set. I don't know why Riot Games loves Portal, because I swear this comp has never been weak the entire set. Maybe there's like one patch where it wasn't S tier, but I don't even remember at this point. But 8 Portal, very strong stuff. Only play this with +1 Portal Spatula or Portal Emblem, whatever you want to call it, and then throw it on any of the flex units. Again, I love playing this comp because there's so many units you could throw in 3 costs. We have like Nico as a shapeshifter. You could use Hui as a blaster to hold your Ryze items, because it pairs up nicely with Ezreal. You could put in any Vanguard, any Bastion, because you run Taric and Galio, any Shapeshifter because you're running Jace. And then in the late game, you generally want to use Nami, because if you have Nora and Galio, you get 2 out of 3 mages, so adding in Nami is a no-brainer. She's both a strong unit, and she activates your Nora. And in the super late game, Nora is like a super strong carry for this comp. If you get 2-star Nora with like 3 items on her, 3 items on Ryze, like you're probably going to win the game, unless other people have something absolutely ridiculous. But most importantly, for most of the game, you want to prioritize Ryze items. So attack speed items are really good for him. red buff really powerful, and then after that a lot of AP items. So you want a lot of rods on this comp because pretty much everyone in your comp can use a rod. You can build like an Ionic Spark on Taric, you can build Hat on Ryze, Archangel's Jeweled Gauntlet on Ryze. Pretty much any item that builds out of rod can almost be put on Ryze. And then of course in the super late game, like Nami and Nora can both use AP items too. I also like having some sort of anti-heal on this build, so normally you put it on Ryze. You could also put it on Nora or Nami. So like a Morella Namicon or a red buff, really good, and that's pretty much that. Next comp up we have is Ryze Flex. Ryze Flex is good because it's playable from a lot of different positions because you don't need a specific augment, but if you do get +1 Scholar, running 6 Scholar is almost like an auto win. I list up at the top here some of the like Exodia comps down here, and like Jinx Wukong, one of them, Ryze Flex, one of them, Kogmaw 2 tanky, really powerful. And what Exodia comp means is essentially like if you hit it, like you're gonna do really, really well. I'm not gonna say like, oh, it's a guaranteed win, because nothing in life ever is. Unless you get 10 3-star legendaries, you're probably not going to get a guaranteed win because there's always some ridiculous stuff that can happen in a game like TFT. The comp you should focus on the most out of these two images here is the top one. We have Preserver Scholar. This is the most played comp. This is a stronger version, but if you can't get any of the preservers because they're too contested or something like that, or maybe you're just not seeing them, you could always try to go for the Arcana version down here. The late game is going to be built around Xerath, and then you use Tahm Kench as your main tank. Not as tanky as the preservers up here. You don't get as many scholars in to really juice up your Ryze, but it is an option if you don't get any of the units in the above picture. Next one up we have is Jinx Wukong. Very simple comp to play. You just want to have some sort of armor penetration on your team, either Even Shroud on Olaf or Last Whisper on like Kogmaw or Jinx. Wukong in the front, Stoneplate, 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 or like double Stoneplate plus some other tank item, maybe like a Warmog's, perfectly fine. Throw in as many Hunters and Preservers as you can, and very simple comp to do, 3-cost reroll. Nothing crazy going on here. If you get good augments such as Category 5 or Hunting Frenzy, you're like giga set. They're just absolutely incredible augments for this comp specifically, and you could just hard force it if you ever get them. Like 4.28, 4.25, same thing, right? Both really, really good. And if you ever get 3-star Wukong and 3-star Jinx, you pretty much win the game, or at least get second or third. It's just hard to get there. But if you can hit them without any econ augments, like I don't see how you don't do really well. And if you do take an econ augment, maybe you spike and knock some people out before you eventually die. But next comp up we have is going to be Mage Reroll. This one's going to be the 1-cost, focus on Soraka and Seraphine. This comp is really fun to play, but a lot of people go for it because it's 1, easy to play, and 2, very, very good. So scout around in the beginning of the game, see if people have tiers and rods, because that's normally the sign to go for them, and if they have a bunch of Sorakas and Seraphines on their bench. If other people don't and you do, definitely go for this. It's like auto force in some cases, if you have a decent start for it. For example, if you get Learning to Spell, really, really good, maybe like a Mage Crest or Spellblades. There's some other augments that work really well with this that I can't think of right now. But for your 3-stars in the backline, just put a mana item on them and then 2 AP items. AP works really, really well with Mage because they cast their ability twice, so it kind of like doubles up in a way. But for this comp, you want to follow the 1-cost reroll. There's a full write-up down here on how to do it, but also for your tank, you want to focus on Vex 2. And sometimes if you're able to, go for a Vex 3. Obviously you want Vex 3, but it's sometimes very expensive to get the 3-star 1-cost and then a 3-star 3-cost, and you also need to level up to fit in 7 Mage. So it can be a little tricky to do, but that's why you have to make a decision during your game whether you want to go for Vex 3 or stay at Vex 2 and level up. It's going to depend a lot on whether you have Mage Emblem, the timing of the game, and what health you're at, and also how many copies of Vexes you have. So obviously if you don't have many copies, don't go for Vex 3 and level up instead. And if you don't have like +1 Mage Emblem, you probably want to level up too so that you could get 7 Mages, because it is a pretty big power spike. But this comp becomes like a lot better with +1 Mage. I wouldn't say it's unplayable without it, but it definitely helps a ton. It maybe goes from like low A tier to like high S tier with the difference in the emblem. But like obviously anything in the A tier is obviously still good, right? And if you get Seraphine and Soraka very early, you could snowball the game completely to where it doesn't really matter whether you have the +1 emblem or not. Next comp up we have is High Horsepower Lillia. Legit, it's the same comp as the Ahri comp, but you just have a very strong Lillia. Sorry, it is a little bit different. You want to focus on like 6 Bastion, but if you do the 4 Scholar, 4 Bastion version, as we saw at the very start, you're still going to do well. Honestly, it depends on what you're hitting that game. You could do either version is what I'm trying to say. There is another version of this build where people play around like Kalista, but pretty much for 4 Bastion versus 6 Bastion, it would really depend on whether you have Ahri 3-star or not. If you have Ahri 2-star, obviously go with 6 Bastion because you need to focus on Lillia for carrying your team. But if you have 3-star Ahri, you could go for 4 Scholar, 4 Bastion. It's not going to hurt you, because then you want to buff up your Ahri because she's going to be doing a lot of carrying too. Essentially, like, your early game is going to be Lillia, and then your mid to late game is going to be Ahri, and then your super late game, probably going to have to add in like some sort of crazy stuff later on. Next comp up we have is going to be Zap Attack Blitz. People love playing it with Ziggs right now, and people are doing a different build than before. So before I recommended going 5 Honeymancy, and by the way, I list out 3 different options here. Normally the top image is the most popular version whenever I do this, so mainly focus on the top comp whenever there are multiple images. But right now people are doing 3 Arcana, 3 Honeymancy, and then a crap ton of 3 stars so that you could Arcana your Ahri to give a lot of AP to your team. So I'm not saying you have to get everyone 3-star, because obviously the game doesn't work out that way. But if you are able to, at least get like 4 of the 6 units to 3-star that you see here. So we have Blitzcrank and Poppy and Ziggs at 1 cost units, and then Ahri, Nunu, and Cassiopeia as 2 cost units. So if you could get like Blitzcrank 3, Ziggs 3, and then maybe you don't have many Poppies, so you skip her. Then for the 2 costs, you get like a 2-star Nunu, but 3-star Ahri and Cassiopeia. I'd say that's pretty good. And then as you level up, you want to drop in the Tahm Kench and Xerath. So pretty much in the early game, you have the core 6 units, Blitz, Ahri, Ziggs, Nunu, Poppy, and Cassio. Then you slowly add in the Tahm Kench and Xerath after you get everyone to 3-star. You could also play this comp on its own without Zap Attack, but obviously it makes it a lot easier if you do have Zap Attack, because you get 3 copies of Blitzcrank. For Blitzcrank items, just go Ionic Spark plus 2 tank items, and then throw a blue buff on your Ziggs with any 2 AP items. Some people like Morello or red buff on him too, but really it's just blue buff plus anything you could build, because you always want to slam items early, so you can't always get perfect items whenever you play this. For positioning, there's a lot of different ways to play this comp. The only thing I will say that you should not do is don't put your Ziggs in the corner like you do with other carries. You always want to put him in one of these 3 middle squares, because you want him to throw at the furthest unit and hit their carries ideally, because that's how his targeting works. He throws a bouncing bomb at the farthest enemy. So the reason why your tanks are in weird positions is because it draws them out in weird ways where he can reach the backline. Like, some people do something like this, some people do something like this. There are a lot of different things you could do. It depends on how your opponents are positioning for what the correct answer is, but you want to draw out their like crappy units or their main tank away from their carry, or like the line of their carry, so that your Ziggs can hit them. So sometimes you want to place them here and it'll hit them. Sometimes you want to place it there and like move your Nunu over here, for example. You kind of have to play around with it and scout a lot to get the actual perfect positioning, because we don't know how your enemies are actually positioning, right? They could have one main tank up in the front like this. They could be doing something like this. And depending on what they do, you have to draw them out in different ways. But I'd say as like a basic tip, just don't put Ziggs in the corners. Like, keep him in the middle squares. That's going to lead to hitting the backline a lot more often. Other than that, do a 1-cost reroll into a 2-cost reroll into a power level. And that's pretty much it for this comp. Very simple to play and also very, very good. I think this comp, let's check it out. Zap Attack is 4.15. Holy cow. That's really, really good. 4.15 is absolutely incredible. If we look at the best augments in the game, you're going to see it's up there. So if you see this, take it, hard force the comp, you're going to be good to go. Reroll Veigar, very, very powerful stuff. Same rules as the Mage. So if you ever get Mage cap at the beginning of the game, like off your 2-1 augment, or maybe you get it from Wandering Trainers, you want to go Mages, right? But maybe you don't have a lot of Seraphines, maybe you don't have a lot of Soraka's, and you're like, I can't do the Seraphine Soraka reroll that Bunny Muffins told me to do in his video that I subscribe to every week and watch every week and recommend to all my friends who play TFT. You could always do the Veigar version. This one is actually easier to play in my opinion, because you just have to focus on Vex and Veigar. So you don't have to do a reroll and decide on what to do after that, because in this comp, you pretty much just want Veigar 3, Vex 3. It works the same exact way as the Jinx comp, the Jinx Wukong comp, where you only care about 2 units, except the units are switched now. And then if you hit Vex 3, Veigar 3, you're going to be winning a lot of games, or like getting top 3 in a lot of games, because the power spike of 3-star 3 cost is so big, but it's a high risk, high reward comp. So that's why you want a +1 mage emblem, so that you can get to 7 mages very easily and use that to kind of stabilize your board to give you time to get Veigar 3, Vex 3. Next comp up we have is Faerie Kalista. This is a highly recommended comp if you have no idea what to do in your game. So if you're a flex gamer and you're like, it's like stage 3 now, like I kind of did like a win-lose, or like I went on a win streak or went on a lose streak. But right now I'm scouting around and this person's going Ryze, this person's going this reroll, this person's going that. Like, all the comps are taken. What do? I don't have any crazy hero augment. I don't have a +1 emblem of anything. Go for this comp. All you need is Rage Blades. So what some people do is they like lose streak for Rage Blades, so they get bows off the carousel every time. If you natural it, then you could go for it if you're win streaking. But you pretty much just need at least one Rage Blade on your Kalista and then a Stone Plate on your Rakan, and you're good to go. The 5 Faerie 3 Preserver version is still very, very strong, and it doesn't need any +1 emblem. But if you do get a +1, the comp does get stronger, but it's not a crazy difference. Whereas for Portal, as we saw up here, the difference between having an emblem and not having an emblem is like 2-tier difference in my opinion. Like I wouldn't even play the comp without the extra emblem. But for Kalista, like 5 Faerie, 7 Faerie, who really cares? It's pretty much the same thing. You just swap out a unit or two. But all you have to do is fast 8 and hope you hit something, and you will be set after that. Next comp up we have is Eldritch. Only play this with +1 Eldritch or School Mascot, preferably both. I think with both, it's definitely like a S+ tier. We can actually check that out in the Explorer version of Teamfight.lol. You type in like School Mascot, for example, and then look at the augment section, and you'll see that like it's like a 3.5, 3.65. Like, I mean, that's pretty nuts, right? But if you get one of those augments in the beginning of the game, obviously if you get both of them, it's pretty much auto win. But if you get one of them, it's still very playable and very, very good. You just need to have some semblance of an Eldritch start. What is an Eldritch start? Maybe being able to play 3 Eldritch on 2-1 with like one of them 2-star. So maybe you have like a 2-star Elise or a 2-star Ashe, and then you get to play an extra Eldritch unit plus the emblem. Gonna be good enough. Maybe you have a stacking Syndra at the start of the game with like a Spear of Shojin right away. That's gonna be another reason to go for this. But there are 2 versions of the comp. There's the Syndra 3 version and then the Nami version. Essentially, if you get a ton of Syndras, or if you're able to stack your Syndra early, go for Syndra 3. If not, screw her, go for Nami instead, and win through having like a big Eldritch summon. So just decide that at the beginning of the game. It'll mainly just be on whether you have Spear of Shojin or not, or an Adaptive Helm. And yeah, that's pretty much it. By the way, you could use a lot of different things as like your item holder for Briar. A lot of people use Nyla. You could also use something like a Shyvana or like some Shapeshifter, because Shapeshifters use Bloodthirster and Steric's Gauge pretty well because they have a big health pool. So that's something to consider if you want an item holder for your Briar. Also remember that you get a lot of item removers during the game, so don't be afraid to put it on like a non-Briar unit essentially. Next one up we have is Multistriker Reroll. All 3 versions are viable. One of them's around Hecarim, one of them's around Kassadin, and other one's around the 1 cost, and it's gonna depend on what you're hitting that game. I'd say in a vacuum, the strongest version is gonna be the Kassadin version in terms of like viability and how easy it is to get. Obviously, Hecarim Reroll is gonna be the strongest, right? Because he's a 3 cost unit, so if you hit 3-star Hecarim, like if you go into the game knowing you can guarantee hit 3-star Hecarim, like yeah, he's going to be the strongest, but that doesn't always happen because he's a 3 cost unit, whereas Kassadin, pretty consistent to hit and also pretty strong. But right now, like Quicksilver on him plus BT Titans is very, very strong item combo. You could pair him up with Akali, Jax, or Ashe as 3-star as well, or just use him solo carry and use like Kalista in the late game, and it's really, really, really good. If you do get Multistriker +1, or Press the Attack, which are the 2 Multistriker augments, it's obviously going to be a lot better. I wouldn't say it's mandatory if you have perfect item Kassadin, or if you get a very good artifact item for Kassadin. Something like a Zonia's Paradox, for example. If we type in Kassadin here, remove School Mascot, go to items, and then go to artifact items, you can see that there are a bunch of really good options on him. So like Wit's End, really good, Trinity Force, Mittens. Mittens is like very, very good because it gives him immunity to chill and a ton of attack speed. So like what more can you ask for on Kassadin? Death Stance pretty good, but that could be a very viable replacement for the Multistriker augments, for example. And then make sure you have some sort of magic penetration on your team, such as an Ionic Spark or a Static Shiv on your Kalista. Static Shiv Kalista does go pretty hard because she attacks so quickly with the Multistrikers, so a very fun build to kind of try out. If you're doing the 1 cost reroll, focus on Jax and Ashe, and then you could still itemize the other Multistrikers later on. And then finally, we have Hecarim. If you do get the Steric's Gauge augment, it's very, very good on Hecarim, but getting Hecarim 3 is pretty difficult, so I would only recommend going for the bottom version here in very, very rare games where you get like 6 Hecarims out of nowhere, and then you're like, all right, maybe I could go for the Hecarim 3, and also if you have good items. Or if you get like What the Forge. What the Forge is actually pretty decent in this comp because there's always someone who could use the items, and they make very good use of them too. Actually, there's a lot of weird things you could do with this comp. You could also do Find Vintage, works really well with Multistrikers because it is a type of augment that works well with melee carries, and you have a lot of melee carries in this build. So very fun set of comps. If you are a beginner, I do recommend trying to go for some of these because they're generally pretty easy to play. Next comp up we have is Kogmaw Reroll. We're only gonna really talk about the 2 tanky Kogmaw. There is like the 4 Hunter and the 5 Honeymancer version, but I really only recommend playing the 2 tanky version, which is what you see here. You play Blitzcrank, Nunu, and Kogmaw, run 2 copies of those, and then add in Rumble and Jinx so that you get some traits. And Kogmaw goes ham. It is an extremely powerful comp and very easy to play because you just do a reroll for Blitzcrank and Kogmaw, sometimes Nunu, and Blitzcrank and Kogmaw can use all sorts of different items. I recommend having, again, Last Whisper or Even Shroud so that you get some armor penetration, but for Kogmaw, Spirit Shoujin is the preferred item, but you can get away without it. You could go full AD and do pretty well. Infinity Edge is nice because you rely a lot on his casting damage. Red buff's pretty good too, get some anti-heal, and Blitzcrank, he's a tank, so obviously he could run any item, and same for Nunu 3-star if you get it. For Hunter version, you could run this with like the Jinx comp, you could run it solo Kogmaw, but I would only go for this if you get +1 Hunter or if you get Hunting Frenzy. But if you get those, you might as well go for the Jinx comp instead, so that's why I don't really recommend playing this middle version. 5 Honeymancy, if you get some Honeymancy augments, you could try for it, but I really just prefer playing the 2 tanky version because it's just a lot stronger than the other 2. Next comp up we have is Ziggs Reroll. It's the same build as the Zap Attack thing we looked at before, but this time it's without Zap Attack. As you can see, it's just like the same units, but like the positioning, like you gotta change it depending on what you see. Arcana your Ahri, and ideally 3-star a lot of stuff so you get a lot of AP on your Ziggs, and he will clear a lot of units in the back line. After this point in the tier list, the comps do take a bit of a dip. I'd say everything above the Ziggs reroll point is like more so like, yeah, I feel good about this. It's like the A+ tier and like the S tiers. And then after that, like it starts to fall off a little bit. Like Shapeshifter Flex is still very good. I'm not saying it's bad by any means. I'm not saying any of the other comps are bad, but I'm saying like there is like a bit of a drop off more so than other patches in my opinion. But if you get a great Shapeshifter start with Eternal Growth, like obviously go Shapeshifters, right? Like that's gonna be really good. And there's a bunch of different things you could do. People play like Varus or Smolder, sometimes Briar. Some people play around the Shyvana to go fast 9. Some people even do like a Namzi reroll. Both versions are viable. If you are doing the top version, I like going for a fast 9 with like Shyvana holding my Briar items and then getting a 1-star copy of Briar or Smolder, because getting one of those 2 units just makes your comp like infinitely stronger. It's one of the stronger power spikes for a 5 cost in my opinion compared to other comps. Like, yeah, Portal can use Nora really well, but they don't like absolutely need it, right? But for Shapeshifters, getting that Briar, like it completely transforms the comp because Briar is like the damage unit for Shapeshifters. If you think of all the other Shapeshifter units, it's like Swain, Nasus, Nico, Shyvana, Elise, Jace. Like, yeah, Shyvana does a little bit of damage, but it's nothing compared to like a 8k HP Briar just like jumping in your face, right? So that's why people really like to fast 9 with this. It's to guarantee getting a 5 cost. Not guarantee, but like give really high chances for it. And yeah, very powerful stuff. BT, Sterix, Titans, Edge of Night, Quicksilver on Briar can be the go-tos for her. Next comp up, we have Flex, Karma, Fiora, Gwen. Only go for this comp if you have a ton of items on your team, because you just have too many units to itemize. Do a fast 8. One of my favorite comps of the set, just because it's pretty flexible, and you play around whoever you hit. Gwen and Fiora do share a bunch of items because they're both melee carries. For example, if you get a Bloodthirster, both of them can use it. I prefer it on Fiora, obviously, but if I have a 1-star Fiora and a 2-star Gwen, I'm going to be putting items on my Gwen. And then Karma is used as a utility unit in the back with blue buff and red buff or blue buff Morello. Next comp up we have is the Witchcraft Fiora Karma or the Ryze version. Ryze is going to be better now, as we saw before in the data check, teamfight.lol for all your data needs. But whichever carry you get, that's the one you're going to use, right? So if you get 2-star Karma, obviously use her. If you get 2-star Ryze, obviously use him. Put the Witchcraft spat on them, and then luckily they use similar items. They both use anti-heal really well, so Morello or red buff is going to fit on them. Karma does like the mana item with the blue buff, but Ryze can use any AP item, so like Archangels or Hat can be used there. Throw in Taric for 3 portal with the Zoe. You also get Scholar from Zoe, and then Fiora Karma can always be used. Preservers can always be used. Before you get Morgana, you run Poppy for Witchcraft, so Poppy and Taric get that Bastion in, so you could always use Taric as a main tank before you get Morgana, and then switch over to Rakan. But like honestly, for tank items, like any of the frontline units can hold it. Just put it on whoever is 2-starred at the time. But just fast 8 for this comp. Make sure you have +1 Witchcraft. Don't attempt this otherwise. If you want to play like the Fiora unit and don't have Witchcraft emblem, like just play the Fiora Karma Gwen version up there, because going like 6 Witchcraft without a +1 emblem is just really, really bad. Next one up we have is Deja Vu Galio. Deja Vu hero augment, pretty good, but he does get griefed a lot by a lot of the mages, but overall it's still a very strong comp if you are able to hit it. You do need perfect items, so if you're on a portal such as component anvils, it's going to be a really good comp to go because you could custom make those rage blades. But if you don't have any bows or rods in the beginning of the game, I would not ever attempt to go for this comp because you legit just need double rage blade, hextech gunblade on Galio, and then 6 Vanguard and as many mages as you can fit. That's pretty much all the comp is. So if you don't get that, don't even attempt it, but it's just a simple 2-cost reroll with the hero augment. Don't really need to talk about it too much. Reroll Warwick, still a very solid comp, even after removing his best item because they did a compensation buff for him. Vanguard of Frost, 1-cost reroll, still good, still playable. After that, we have Spin to Win Wukong. This is the same version as the Jinx, but you use Spin to Win. It's a bit lower on the tier list because I don't think he's that necessary for the Jinx comp to really pop off. Obviously, it's still very, very good, but it's the same comp as the Jinx comp, so we don't really have to talk about that too much. Sugarcraft, if you get +1 Sugarcraft, I think we saw before in the augment data check, like Sugarcraft crown is apparently like one of the best things ever. It's because you get an item, a rumble, and the emblem. So like obviously the item helps a lot in stacking your units, but I mean, if we type in Sugarcraft here, like, yeah, like 3.96, 4.32, both very respectable on stage 2, but it really only works if you have a lot of items in the beginning and you have the emblem. So it's very, very strong, but very, very situational. So that's why it's not like S tier, right? But like if you can meet those requirements every time, it definitely would be S tier. Arcana Varus kind of forgotten in this patch. He's not bad, he's just not as good as he was before. But if you get like Arcana Crest, I would recommend going for this. 5 Arcana with the Varus is very powerful. And yeah, just do like the double IE build. Maybe you have like a Shoujin or red buff as a 3rd item and he will pop everyone. And then late game Xerath, fast 8 on this, very self-explanatory. Similar to the other fast 8 comps, you just swap out the units. So always use your team planner. It's very, very helpful when doing the roll down. Blaster Vanguard Hui, I think like this comp is always pretty underrated, mainly because no one goes for this. No one cares about Ezreal, no one cares about Hui. Even Mordekaiser people don't care about too much. So if other people are doing 3-cost reroll and taking all the Jinx, Wukongs, Vexes, Veigars out of the pool, you can go for this and hit it pretty easily because no one's buying these units. And if you get them to 3-star, you have 4 Blaster in, like Ezreal and Hui will pop people, but without that, I wouldn't really go for this because you would only try this if other people are 3-cost reroll. Obviously, there exists some games where you get them for free. In those cases, go for it, still gonna be good. But I would mainly attempt to go for this if you see a lot of other people going for the 3-cost units that are not these, so that you could hit this pretty easily later on if you roll after them. If you get +1 emblems of either Vanguard or Blaster, that's another reason to go for this. Or if you get Shields Up is pretty useful because it buys a lot of time for your team. Next comp up we have is gonna be Chrono Karma. If you get +1 Chrono, you could go for this, but it's kind of difficult to get and the reward for it isn't that high anymore. 6 Chrono used to be very, very good. It used to average like a 3.5. I think it's averaging like a 4.1 right now. So for a 6 trait that needs an emblem and a legendary unit, I don't think that's worth it, right? It's kind of like buying a Honda for like 100 grand, right? Like nothing wrong with Hondas. It's better than the Kia I was driving, you know? But for 100 grand, there are probably other cars to go for, right? I actually don't know how much cars actually cost nowadays. I haven't bought a car in a while, but what I'm trying to say is like the juice isn't worth the squeeze for this comp. If you're win streaking and you get a Chrono emblem offered to you, I would try to go for this because that way you could go to level 9 or like have a ton of gold on level 8 to get that 1 copy of Camille, activate your 6 Chrono, and then you win a lot of games after that. Next build up we have is Witchy Wallop Poppy. Just do the Ahri build that we saw before for 4 Bastion, 4 Scholar. Or you could go for 6 Bastion version also. It's pretty much just like a worse version of the Lillia build. The reason why is because Poppy uses attack damage items and Ahri's a AP carry. So if you do like Ionic Spark on your Lillia, it's really good because both Lillia and Ahri take advantage of the magic shred. But for Poppy, she does physical. So it's like if you build an Ionic Spark, it's like not that great for her. If you build an Even Shroud, it's not that great for Ahri. So it does make sense why this is the case, but it's still very powerful because you're able to go the Ahri comp, and Ahri's just really, really good right now. Pyro Varus, if you get 5 Pyro, that's the only time I'd play this. Pyro Spat on a Smolder 2 absolutely wipes the floor with everything. Same with Pyro Spat on Briar. So if you ever get legendary 2 stars with this build, like Again, I'm not going to say it's auto win because nothing in life is auto win except for 53-star legendaries, right? But we all can't be so lucky, so sometimes getting 5 Pyro with a 2-star Briar or 2-star Smolder with Pyro Spat and other good items like is an auto win, right? But for most of the game, you're going to be focused on your Varus to do most of your carrying for you, so just make sure you're running some sort of blaster before you do get Smolder. And for frontline, like, you want to play all the Pyro units, and Nasus is just the best tank unit in the comp, so just throw in Shapeshifter. You don't have to run 4 Shapeshifter because it really only gets powerful once you add in that Briar, because Briar's a legendary. So if you have 2 Shapeshifter, that's good enough. If you run like a random 2-star unit in addition to that, like maybe you could run like a Taric to pair up with your Shen, and it kind of works like that. But very good comp if you are able to get to 5 Pyro. Other comps we have Frostfire, Olaf Varus, not that great. Katarina Reroll, like most of these in the B tier just aren't up to snuff right now. They're not up to the standard of all the other comps in the meta, so I would kind of skip those for now. Summing up at the top, mainly just focus on like Ryze and Ahri Bastion. Like those are going to be the best 2 comps. If you get reroll angles for Jinx Wukong, Mage Reroll, Veigar, Multistriker, go for those. If you get +1 emblems for Eldritch, Portal, Witchcraft, go for those. And lastly, if you have nothing else to go for Faerie Kalista. That's pretty much going to be what you want to do. For hero augments like high horsepower Lillia, Zap Attack Blitzcrank, those are like auto picks in my opinion. If you have like 1 or 2 copies of Lillia or Blitzcrank, like just go for it, and items for Ziggs or Ahri, whoever you're going. But that's gonna be it from me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video or found it helpful. I'll be watching the TFT qualifiers this weekend. It should be pretty interesting, and then obviously Worlds after that. So let me know down in the comments below if anyone even follows that. I'm not sure if too many people do, because sometimes I skip it, but I have some of my friends playing in it, so I'll watch for them. But if you found this video helpful, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below. And if you are already subscribed, share it with a friend. That's always going to be the best way to support me. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.